Good to be here. Good to see some familiar faces. First of all, I just want to start by saying anytime you're asked to return to a place that you helped build.
Everyone notices the packed arenas, the surging ratings, and the jaw-dropping plays from Caitlin Clark. They witness the rise of a phenomenon expected to transform the sport for years to come. Yet what remains unseen is the tension quietly building behind the scenes in Indiana. A situation so volatile it could disrupt everything before it truly gets underway. This isn't a simple case of a newcomer finding her footing. It's a clash of influence between a once-in-a-generation star and those shaping her path, leading to a stunning ultimatum that was never meant to surface publicly. The entire WNBA has its eyes on the Indiana Fever, but the deeper narrative, the one that might shape Caitlin Clark's legacy, is unfolding out of sight. And it began with a player flying completely under the radar. A hidden asset waiting on the sidelines, because on the floor the Fever's approach looks straightforward. Put the ball in Caitlin Clark's hands and let her create. She's the driving force, the headline attraction, the reason for the attention and endorsements. However, as opponents adjusted, they started targeting her relentlessly with double teams, triple coverage, and an intensity of contact that has shocked both fans and analysts alike. Clark is an offensive genius, but she's also an island made to battle for every single basket. And sitting there on the sideline observing everything is Justine Pissott. Music. Pissott is far more than just another name on the roster. She arrived as a precision shooter, a lethal three-point threat out of Vanderbilt. Exactly the type of weapon meant to flourish next to a creator like Clark. Music. Her role is to stretch the defense, to make opponents pay whenever they collapse on the team centerpiece. Yet night after night, she receives minimal minutes on the floor. This isn't by chance. It's an intentional decision, and it has built an unseen barrier within the team's offensive flow. Supporters began raising concerns, but the real tension was coming from within the organization, and what unfolded during games was only a reflection of a much deeper and more unsettling problem. The quiet disconnect between Clark and Pissott on the court was being mirrored loudly inside the locker room. Murmurs began to surface from those close to the team, revealing not a united squad rallying around their rising star, but a growing internal separation. The storyline wasn't simple envy, as many from the outside believed. The experienced players recognized Clark's ability. The issue ran deeper, rooted in a core disagreement over the team's identity and overall approach. Portion of the roster believed the Caitlin Clark spotlight was turning the offense into something predictable, and even worse, easy to contain. They argued that a more diversified approach, one that brought in contributors like Pissott to form a multi-layered attack, was the only route toward lasting success. While on the opposite side, there was a strong conviction that you lean fully into your superstar, allowing your top player the space to decide games on her own terms. Clark herself, shaped by always being the first option throughout her career, was reportedly finding it difficult to rely on teammates who had yet to prove themselves under the intense spotlight of the WNBA. This wasn't rooted in negativity. It was the natural instinct of a fierce competitor carrying the expectations of an entire franchise. Yet this divide in philosophy was generating visible strain. Practices grew more heated. Film sessions were said to be filled with quiet disagreements, and the group slowly began splitting into opposing sides. This widening gap created an incredibly difficult situation for the individual stuck right in the middle. Head coach Christie Sides. And what followed pushed her into a scenario no coach ever hopes to face. Christie Sides found herself balancing on a razor's edge as pressure mounted. On one side stood her generational star Caitlin Clark, a player capable of taking over games alone, and one who required a certain degree of freedom to perform. And a coach's natural tendency is to elevate their best talent, to design everything around their strengths. But disregarding Clark's instincts or forcing her into a structure she didn't fully trust risked creating distance between them. Music, a catastrophic outcome for the franchise. But on the other side was the front office, led by a president with a completely different outlook. Alyssa Tucker and her group weren't focused solely on the next matchup. They were constructing a long-term vision, a detailed blueprint. Music, aimed at building a lasting powerhouse. Every rotation change, each minute distribution, every decision from sides was being closely evaluated from above. Pressure from the front office pushed her to involve more players, to grow the supporting cast, and to demonstrate that the Fever were more than a one-player spectacle. Sides found herself stuck in a relentless push and pull. If she leaned toward Clark, she risked appearing compromised in the eyes of those who employed her. If she aligned with management, she risked losing the confidence of her most vital player. This conflict unfolded live during games through puzzling substitutions and an offense that felt out of sync, leaving observers questioning the true strategy. Yet, the front office wasn't merely offering guidance. They were following a hidden framework, a larger plan that music, the public, and even Clark didn't fully grasp. Fever president Alyssa Tucker didn't rise to her role through short-term thinking. She operates like a strategist, a chess mind in a league evolving quickly. From her viewpoint, this situation wasn't about a role player or doubting Caitlin Clark's ability. Music, it centered on protecting assets and building sustained dominance. Tucker recognized the harsh physicality Clark was facing every single night. She saw the hits, physical toll, the wear and tear, the fatigue. She understood that no athlete, regardless of how gifted, could endure that level of punishment across a full season, let alone over the span of a career. Her top concern was safeguarding the franchise's multi-million-dollar asset, and in her view, the solution to that protection was Pissott, music. Tucker's larger strategy was straightforward yet uncompromising in its reasoning. By placing Pissott consistently on the floor, it would alter the spacing of the game entirely. Her reputation as a perimeter shooter would theoretically force defenses to stay disciplined. They wouldn't be able to abandon her to overload on Clark. This would open lanes for Clark to work, decrease the constant defensive pressure, and ultimately music preserve her durability while extending her longevity. Pissott wasn't just another option. She was a tactical requirement. Music, essentially a shield in the form of floor spacing. Tucker viewed Clark's hesitation to involve Pissott as a critical oversight, a brilliant talent missing the broader perspective. And if the player couldn't recognize it, then the organization would ensure it happened. This was no longer a recommendation. Music, it was becoming an order. And the moment of confrontation finally came when Alyssa Tucker arranged a private closed-door meeting. It just her and Caitlin Clark. No coaches, no agents, no distractions. The tone was reportedly not one of negotiation, compromising in its directness. Tucker outlined the entire scenario not as a discussion, but as a firm declaration. She detailed the organization's direction, emphasized the strategic value of players like Pissott, and stressed the absolute necessity of shielding Clark from the physical toll she was facing, framing it as essential to the franchise's survival. Then came the moment that changed everything. Tucker delivered the ultimatum. It wasn't framed as a threat of a trade or reduced minutes. That would have been unthinkable. Instead, it struck at something far more foundational. She made it clear that incorporating Justine Pissott into the offense, actively finding her on the floor and creating opportunities for her shots, was no longer a choice. It had become a central pillar of the team's official system. Music, the message was simple. Either Clark commits to this collective approach and raises the level of those around her, or the front office would be forced to reconsider how the entire offense was designed. This could involve play calls from the sideline that intentionally shifted the ball out of her hands during crucial stretches, altering the focal point of the attack and ultimately challenging her control on the court. Music, it was a direct confrontation with her identity as a player. Adapt to the structure or have the structure imposed on you. The room fell into a heavy silence, with the future of the Fever hinging entirely on Clark's reaction. And in the days after that private meeting, music, a thick, almost suffocating tension, spread throughout the organization. Everyone sensed that something significant had changed, even if the details remained unknown or different. The energy was coiled, uncertain. Teammates and coaches watched Clark's every move, trying to earn a response. Would she push back? Would she pull inward and distance herself? Music, would she challenge the directive coming from above? Many expected a quiet frustration, a subtle resistance playing out during games. But Caitlin Clark's reaction, music, was completely unexpected. She didn't show anger or retreat into isolation. Instead, music, she sharpened her focus, becoming almost eerily composed. Music, she began staying long after practices ended, not only taking shots, but diving into film with a heightened level of intensity. She was noticed in low-key discussions with assistant coaches, pointing music at diagrams and asking detailed questions not just about her responsibilities, but about the positioning and purpose of every player on the court. She even reportedly went directly to Justine Music Pissott, not with emotion, but with precise, strategic questions about her preferred areas on the floor and how she wanted to receive the ball off movement. It wasn't the kind of warm, team-bonding moment some might have expected. It felt distant, methodical, and strictly professional. Clark wasn't resisting the ultimatum. She was analyzing it, breaking it down, and quietly preparing to turn it into something the front office might not have anticipated. A new and more complex stage of this internal battle had begun, and the on-court results following the ultimatum have been both intriguing and unclear. In the first few games, there were visible adjustments. Clark intentionally looked for Pissott, delivering passes in moments where she previously would have taken the shot herself. Music were moments of connection. A quick pass leading to an open three that gave a glimmer of hope. It looked like his high-stakes risk might be starting to show results, hinting that a sharper, more dangerous version of the fever could be taking shape. Yet those old habits would still surface in late clock situations or when the pressure peaked. Clark would fall back into instinct, lowering her head and attacking the entire defense alone. The link with Pissott would disappear, and the offense would once again revolve solely around her, raising questions about whether this signaled a deeper divide, evidence that chemistry can't be manufactured, or simply the natural process of a player reshaping years of ingrained instinct. The reality is no one truly knows. Some analysts point to visible flaws, arguing that the force dynamic is making Clark hesitant and overly analytical, while others see the early stages of something new, claiming these struggles are necessary steps toward building a championship foundation. Right now, the Indiana Fever stand on a razor's edge. The ultimatum has triggered a sequence that could either lead to the rise of a dynasty built on trust and strategic unity or break the team apart from within, becoming a warning story of a front office that pushed its superstar too aggressively. What's unfolding is far more than a typical rookie campaign. It's a high-pressure fight over the identity of a franchise. The Fever's leadership has taken a bold gamble, betting they can shape their generational talent to match their vision, even if it required a historic ultimatum. They believe they are guiding Caitlin Clark for long-term success and protecting their most valuable piece for sustained title contention. But in doing so, they may have sparked a tension that won't easily fade. True chemistry, the kind that wins championships, is unpredictable and develops naturally through trust, respect, and shared instinct over time, not through pressure-filled, closed-door decisions. And the question that will define the Indiana Fever for years to come, music, is whether this forced transformation will be remembered as a moment of strategic brilliance that unlocked the true potential or a catastrophic miscalculation that fractured the relationship with their superstar beyond. Can a front office really control the soul of a team? Or have they completely misread what makes a player like Caitlin Clark special? The answer will play out in real time, one pressure-filled possession after another. The entire basketball world will be watching to see whether this ultimatum creates a powerhouse or becomes the first crack in its base. This whole situation exposes a harsh reality about professional sports that fans rarely witness. Beyond the highlights and interviews exists a complicated system driven by business decisions and authority. Tucker's decision, while surprising, reflects a calculated corporate mindset. In that perspective, players are viewed as investments, and the objective is to maximize long-term value. The physical strain on Clark wasn't only about her health. It represented a direct risk to the organization's financial future. Every missed game due to injury, every shortened prime caused by fatigue translates into millions lost in ticket revenue, merchandise, and broadcast deals. From this viewpoint, Pissott becomes less of a teammate and more of a structural necessity, almost like a safeguard against the inevitable, where placed on the franchise's most valuable asset. This kind of thinking can feel cold to fans who appreciate the emotion and creativity of the sport, music, but it's the hidden force behind decision-making at the highest level. The ultimatum marked the point where this business-driven logic collided with the natural instincts of a superstar. For her entire career, Caitlin Clark has thrived under a simple formula: controlling the ball, music, and delivering in decisive moments. Her entire basketball identity is built on the belief that she is the best option on the court at any given time, and the ultimatum directly challenged that foundation, suggesting that the very instincts that made her extraordinary were considered a liability to the long-term health of the organization. That it creates a deep psychological tension that is difficult to ignore. How does a player who has spent her entire journey being rewarded for individual dominance learn to consistently defer? How does she place trust in a structure that was not built with her input, but instead imposed through authority rather than collaboration? This is the delicate balance Clark is now forced to maintain. She must align her natural instinct to take control with the front office's demand for shared responsibility. Every possession becomes more than just a basketball decision. It turns into a subtle statement within a larger power struggle that unfolded away from the spotlight. The way she is responding, with calm precision and measured focus, may be the most revealing element of all. There is no visible frustration, no public confrontation, no request to be moved. Instead, she is adapting, quietly absorbing the new framework and operating within it. Music. This points to a level of emotional control and strategic awareness that extends far beyond her scoring ability. She seems to recognize that the smartest path is not to dismantle the system, but to understand it well enough to succeed inside it, turning constraint into opportunity. This silent contest of control and adaptation has become the true heartbeat of the Fever season. What happens on the scoreboard is only the surface reflection of a far more complex internal battle. If Clark and the organization manage to synchronize their approaches, the result could be a team that blends raw talent with structured execution in a way that is extremely difficult to stop, a rare fusion of creativity and discipline. Music. However, if this enforced alignment breaks down, the consequences could be severe, potentially creating long-lasting division inside the locker room, weakening the authority of the coaching structure, and eventually pushing Clark toward a future exit once circumstances allow. The pressure surrounding this situation is enormous, not just for the FEVER seconds but for the WNBA as a whole, which has hitched its wagon to Clark's rising star. Music. The world is watching to see if the league's most fate of a franchise and careers hanging in the balance. This ultimatum, delivered inside the quiet walls of an office, has ignited a public unfolding that will shape legacies for years to come. And as attention shifts to every possession on the court, it becomes clear we are no longer simply watching a game, but witnessing a live collision of business strategy, power, and elite athletic ambition. Every pass toward Pissott, every shot taken by Clark instead of passing, becomes another layer in a narrative still actively being written. The final outcome remains unknown, but one thing is certain: the story is far from finished.